When you hear the words Dark Ages, what do you imagine? A time of ignorance? Superstition? 1,000 years where nothing good happened? That's the story the modern world wants you to believe. That after the fall of Rome, humanity stumbled into darkness and only escaped when people finally broke free from the church. But what if I told you that story is a lie? That the so-called Dark Ages were not dark at all, and if anything, it was the Catholic Church that kept the flame of civilization alive when everything else was collapsing. Today we're going to uncover the real history, a story of courage, wisdom, and faith, and why we owe the survival of Western civilization to Catholics. First, let's set the stage. In 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire officially fell. Rome, the great empire that had ruled for centuries, crumbled under the weight of corruption, invasion, and decay. Across Europe, chaos exploded. Cities collapsed. Trade routes disappeared. Governments disintegrated. The roads, the law, the education systems that Rome had built, gone. It wasn't the church that caused this collapse. The church was caught inside it, like everyone else. And while kings and generals fought over the ruins, the Catholic Church quietly began building something stronger than any empire. A civilization rooted not in power, but in truth. The first thing the church did was simple, but revolutionary. It preserved knowledge. When libraries were burned, when schools shut down, when literacy became rare, it was Catholic monks who refused to let learning die. In cold, isolated monasteries across Europe, monks spent their lives copying manuscripts by hand. They didn't just preserve the Bible. They preserved Greek philosophy, Roman law, scientific writings, medical texts, everything they could save. If you have ever read Aristotle, Cicero, or even the plays of ancient Rome, you can thank Catholic monks. Because when the rest of the world was tearing itself apart, they were bent over parchment under candlelight, patiently saving the treasures of the mind. But they didn't stop at preserving the past. The church became the engine of new growth. Catholic monasteries became the first universities. Monks studied not only theology, but astronomy, medicine, botany, and engineering. It was in monasteries that crop rotation was developed, revolutionizing agriculture and allowing people to grow more food. It was Catholic abbeys that provided hospitals, shelters for the poor, and schools for orphans. While kings waged endless wars, the church built the basic systems that made civilized life possible again. And this wasn't accidental. It was based on one simple Catholic belief, that every human life has value, because every human being is made in the image of God. Meanwhile, Catholic thinkers didn't abandon reason, they deepened it. Far from being enemies of science, the Church Fathers invented the modern scientific method. The great medieval scholars, like St. Albert the Great and his student Thomas Aquinas, taught that faith and reason are not enemies. They are two wings lifting the human soul to the truth. It was a Catholic worldview that insisted creation is orderly, nature follows laws, and those laws can be studied and understood. Because God is not a God of chaos, but a God of reason. Without this foundation, modern science would not exist. And remember, the first true universities were Catholic institutions: Paris, Bologna, Oxford, Salamanca, all built under the guidance of the Church, not to brainwash, but to seek truth, not to suppress, but to enlighten. Even the idea of human rights, which so many take for granted today, was born not in the Enlightenment, but in the heart of the Catholic Church. The teachings that slavery was evil, that the poor deserve dignity, that women have inherent worth, that rulers must answer to a higher moral law, all came from Catholic theology. You don't have to take my word for it. Historians like Tom Woods and Rodney Stark, even secular ones, have shown how Catholicism transformed the brutal tribalism of Europe into a culture that valued mercy, justice, and charity. The Dark Ages were not dark because of the church. They were dark because the world had collapsed. And it was the church, through blood, sweat, and sacrifice, that kept the lamps burning. Now you might wonder, why does the myth of the Dark Ages even exist? Why does the modern world paint the church as the villain? Because it's easier to sell progress. When you pretend everything that came before was stupid and evil, it's easier to throw away faith. When you rewrite history to make faith look like the enemy of freedom. But history is stubborn. And if you look closely, you'll see that the church was not an enemy of civilization. It was its savior. Every hospital, every university, every court of justice that defends the weak, every scientific breakthrough based on the assumption that nature follows laws, all of it stands on the shoulders of Catholics who refused to let the world stay broken. Was the Middle Ages perfect? Of course not. There were wars, injustices, corruption, because wherever humans are involved, sin is involved too. But the myth that it was 1,000 years of darkness controlled by a backward church, that's not just wrong. It's a lie. A lie designed to separate you from your history, from your heritage, from the truth. The truth is, you are the heir of a civilization saved by faith. You are the child of a church that, when the world fell apart, refused to give up. You stand on ground built by monks, missionaries, priests, and everyday Catholics, who believe that Christ is not just a Sunday habit, but the cornerstone of a whole way of life. So the next time someone mocks the Dark Ages, the next time someone tells you that Catholicism held back progress, remember this. When the world was falling, it was the church that stood. When knowledge was dying, it was Catholics who kept it alive. When human dignity was forgotten, it was the church that whispered to a broken world, "You are made in the image of God. You are not forgotten. You are loved." The Dark Ages weren't dark because of the church. They were dark. And the church was the light that refused to go out. And maybe, just maybe, that same light is what we need again today.